create some opportunities for towns to be involved. On the state front, as I said, in this budget, the big issue that we have the benefit of this current fiscal year and in the proposed budget before you is some increased shared rooms and meals tax revenue from the state, which the state legislature agreed to do last session as part of an overall decision to actually lower the tax rate from 9 to 8.5%. It's part of the reason our undesignated fund balance is so much healthier than we had thought it might be, because that windfall amount of money accrued to us in this current year's budget, Peter, but also we are budgeting for additional rooms and meals tax revenue next year. I don't anticipate that will extend beyond the next fiscal year, but you never know. In terms of general fund budget highlights, Norm Bernache has assumed an additional $19.3 million in increased total assessed valuation. That generates an additional $79,902 in revenue for the town. We did not go hog wild on estimating short-term interest income. Obviously, everybody thinks the Fed will raise interest rates. Now they may be backing off just a little bit because of the invasion in Ukraine. At any rate, we didn't want to risk being overly optimistic on the interest income side. I talked about the rooms and meals tax windfall that's coming to us this year in this proposed budget. Motor vehicle revenue, unfortunately, pretty static. And I think that's because even though people seem to have disposable income to buy new cars, nobody can find a new car to buy because of supply chain problems. So we assumed a flat on the motor vehicle and registration income. The one item in this budget that we tapped general fund undesignated fund balance for was one ground mounted solar tracker for $28,500 at the Etna Library. We have 180,000, Peter, budgeted for the Brissette Fund, and I know you want to talk about that, but I targeted the Stores Pond or the Campion Arena Hanover Improvement Society contribution, 40,000 for trail improvements is in support of the Pine Park Association, and 40,000 for additional expenditure. So I'm sure we'll get to that. And then a reminder that two major payments will expire here in the next couple of years. The $75,000 bond payment for the community center goes away in this upcoming budget. So after this upcoming budget, that will be paid off. And the last $100,000 payment, we originally committed $2 million to the high school project. The last $100,000 payment over 20 years will be paid in FY 23-24.
Couldn't believe
It's been 20 years.
that's paid. So
Yeah, I know.
I thought it must be 10 years.
No, it's been 20 years, so it expires in 23-24. We do have reflected in the budget a 3% wage scale adjustment for employees plus the 2% step. And in addition, there is the assumption of a 6.9% increase, guaranteed maximum rate increase from the Health Trust for our health insurance premium. Typically, when we get a confirming number in April, it's lower than that 6.9%, but we always budget the guaranteed maximum just to be on the safe side. We have budgeted a little bit of extra in the town clerk's town tax collector portion of the administrative services department, as we look to having to sort of rethink our whole approach to the town clerk role, as I explained in my transmittal message, now that Betsy McLean has decided she doesn't want to run for town clerk again. We've got funds budgeted, 100,000 for our rental housing inspection program and all the related expenses paid for by revenue to be generated from that program, but dependent on the adoption of an ordinance. We do have funds budgeted in IT to upgrade our website software. And that is something that you could potentially fund out of undesignated fund balance if you chose. Also, in the Howe Library budget, we've budgeted an extra $5,000 roughly to restore the youth services librarian from 85% to full-time. That position was reduced down to 85%. Several years ago when the incumbent wanted to ramp back a little bit on her hours, but she's retiring in April and Ruby Simon would like to go back to full-time in that position. We have reinstated funding for the community center's administrative assistant position, which is the person that meets and greets individuals and handles all the traffic and both online and telephone and website that comes, which we froze when the former employee Jean Vieten retired in 2020, and we knew we needed to find some form of savings in our budget as COVID was ongoing. Grounds division, sadly, the Emerald Ash Borer is now in our backyard. Asa Metcalf is already proactively funding the treatment of multiple town street trees that are ash, but he's anticipating we're going to have to start taking ash trees down. So we're budgeting $12,500 of additional money for that. 2 cruisers to be replaced, both funded from the reserve. These are the administrative cruisers, so the chief and the captain's vehicles. Highway equipment proposed to be replaced, 6-wheel dump truck, bulldozer, heavy duty work on our bulldozer, and the construction of a small storage shed for our liquid calcium chloride, which we spread on the sidewalks. That's the striping that you see spread just before a storm. Appropriation of money from the Municipal Transportation Improvement Fund. That's the motor vehicle surcharge you pay when you register your vehicle to build a sidewalk segment from Reservoir Road up to the Strong Trail, from Hemlock at Reservoir up to the Strong Trail.
On that side?
On that side, because of the number of kids who come down from those 2 neighborhoods, walk to school. This was one of the priorities, I think, of the bike ped committee, bicycle bike walk committee. Fair amount of work envisioned at both our public works facility in the form of replacement of flooring in the building, in the administrative building, replacement of some single pane windows in that building that are horribly energy inefficient, construction of a new glass recycling drop-off so we can remove it from the cemetery location to DPW, along with the security gate and repaving of the parking lot, and a replacement of the membrane roof on the community center, all funded from the building capital reserve. And then we've got 3 major capital projects that are envisioned. One is the reconstruction of College Street from East Wheelock to Wentworth, $336,000. The college is funding that. We're doing the work. And then the 2 earmark federal funded programs for the LED fixtures and the MUP. Fire fund budget's very straightforward. It essentially amounts to a decrease in the fire district tax rate. Police chief will talk to you about his plans relative to replacing the old engine 5 with a new, more versatile, smaller piece of equipment. Now that engine 5 is coming to the end of its useful life, and the department's focus on underwater rescue as part of their training. Ambulance fund, minor increase in the ambulance fee charged to all residents of Hanover, Lyme, and Norwich, simply based on general increased costs in the fire fund and translated to the ambulance fund. And then Peter Kolbacki will give you detailed updates on what's happening on the water utility side and the wastewater fund side. Suffice it to say, both are going to be pretty dynamic and active over the next decade. Preview of coming attractions. And then the parking fund, which is the budget, quite frankly, that was most hard hit by the pandemic. We have a fairly ambitious set of capital projects we're trying to finish up in the parking garage and a couple of security projects in our parking lots. But otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward operating budget for this next year as we wait to see how parking patterns rebound in downtown. And that is it for the budget as proposed. 35,000 foot highlights.
Expand a little bit on the 2 grants for the month and the lights. How did those come about?
So we were approached by both Congresswoman Custer and also by Senator Shaheen, asking multiple cities and towns in New Hampshire to quickly prepare potential projects that we would seek funding for from an earmark opportunity. We had to act very quickly, like we had a week to prepare the numbers. And it was pretty clear from the initial conversations with staff in both Congresswoman Custer and Senator Shaheen's office, what they thought was most likely to be funded in terms of what felt to be the priorities emerging out of their respective congressional committees. So we put together proposals to do the air source heat pumps in police and DPW and the LED streetlights. And the LED streetlight conversion was the one that was selected, proposed, and funded. We also put together a proposal for the MUP from Chase Field to the race school, and also a MUP that would continue from the Reservoir Road large traffic circle or roundabout to the race school on Reservoir Road. Senator Shaheen agreed to fund the MUP. And to submit that as a proposal, along with multiple other community proposals. So we weren't the only ones that were submitting projects. Not every community's project as submitted was funded. Fortunately, we had one in each area of funding that was selected. So we haven't gotten word on when we can expect to receive the funding. So that's still on hold, but I wanted to make sure we had it appropriated so that we wouldn't need to come back to the board for a public hearing when those monies come in, so that we could move forward to do both those projects.
And one other, in looking at this in terms of headcount, it looks like there's only one new position, which is the rental housing,
Right,
which will be funded by
revenues,
revenues from that.
Correct.
The rest of it looks like we're reinstating positions that have been postponed or not filled or delayed because of the COVID and the lack of activity in the various departments.
All we're doing is reinstating one position, Peter, in the Parks and Recreation Department and increasing to full-time what had previously been full-time until a few years ago when it became 85% time in the library.
Basically, no change in headcount other than the rental housing.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that overview.
Yeah.
Why don't we get started? Who's up first?
I'm gonna text the police chief. We've got people deployed all over the building so that you don't have to, we're not overloaded here. So hold on, Molly.
I'm up first with the police department and the parking division. And so that's Charlie and actually Mike's here. I don't know if Sergeant Ballard's coming. I
Yeah.
think he is.
Okay, there we go.
And they're gonna give us the highs and lows.
Yep, I just sent them a text, so they should be here.
I think they'll begin the theme
Yep,
that
yep,
we'll be hearing about.
yep. They outside the room. All right. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Come on.
Welcome,
Thank you. Good evening.
welcome. Chief, thanks for being here. I think you know the routine. We ask all of our department heads to give us the highs and lows and what's keeping you up at night. And so thank you for being here and thank you for bringing your team. Sergeant Ballard's here and I forget your last name, Mike.
Shabola. Yep.
Shabola. That's a good name.
And Doug Hackett has joined us on
Oh, hi, Doug.
Zoom. Yeah.
Take it away.
All right. Good evening, Chairman Christie, members of the Select Board, and Town Manager Julie Griffin. For the record, I'm Charlie Dennis. I'm the Chief of Police. I'll begin our presentation with what our biggest challenges were in this past year. There are two main challenges that rise to the top. One is the crisis related to officer staffing levels, which I'll speak to at the end of the presentation. The other is the continuation of staff working in a pandemic environment and the variety of difficulties and challenges they face that surface that are pandemic related. The drivers and major changes of our budget, so major drivers always salaries and benefits. There are increases due to contracted services with year 2 of our 5-year contract with CSI, which is for our new computer-aided dispatch system and records management software. Also, the replacement of existing cruiser cameras, body cameras, and less lethal equipment. Replacement of the emergency operations center tables and chairs. There's a sharp increase in the charges for all dispatch phone lines and also for our ELAN circuits, which is the Ethernet local area network, which connects the simulcast radio network together. There's also a proposed withdrawal from the capital reserve, the planned replacement of 2 gas model cruisers with 2 hybrid cruisers. To date, Don Foster, our supervisor over fleet at DPW, has seen cost savings with utilizing the hybrids. What accomplishments are we most proud of? We were able to give 3 awards out this year. Former Corporal Benson received our 2021 Life-Saving Award for his actions related to an elderly individual that was choking at a local restaurant. His quick response and actions saved a life that day. Corporal Mary McGee received the 2021 Outstanding Service Award for her outstanding police work and investigative skills involving the apprehension of 2 prowlers, which restored community safety to both the Dartmouth and the Hanover communities. We launched a childhood cancer awareness campaign last year. Sergeant Upper coordinated this event in honor of our local Hanover child, Josie Hatfield, who had leukemia. He coordinated a blood drive, a swearing-in ceremony of our first junior police officer, Josie. He created an investigation training scenario for her and some close friends to participate in. And then in September, we launched a full campaign for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Sergeant Uppert also did another blood drive, a truck event at the race school where we had over 200 people show up. And he received our 2021 Community Service Award for his outstanding work in building community relations. The continuation of the pandemic and a variety of variants that seem to keep coming has slowed our community outreach activities overall. For instance, we had no populist confidence this year. We were able to hold one craze training in December of 2021 at the Hanover Terrace, which is our first since the pandemic started. We have continued to offer our rate progression defense classes to our community when possible, but due to the ongoing pandemic environment, we did not host any this year, but we also assisted 3 agencies that did. We have one class scheduled in March 22 as part of the high school's March intensive program. I'm proud and thankful for all my staff who I believe strive to provide great quality customer service on a daily basis to our community and visitors alike. They continue to work hard during this ongoing pandemic and adjustments when necessary to ensure that shifts are covered. Both our dispatch and patrol divisions have worked short-staffed for the majority of this past year, but always stepping up as a team to make sure those shifts are covered. I'm proud of our supervisory and command staff who have worked hard daily to mentor and motivate staff, work to ensure that they're following best practices and helping us implement ideas and systems and technology to further increase our efficiency and effectiveness. I want to recognize Doug Hackett, who's done an outstanding job managing our day-to-day operations of the Hanover Regional Dispatch Center. We dispatched over 22 communities and 48 different agencies. He's done an excellent job working on the CSI CAD-RMS project, bring those systems into 2022 technology versus the old system, which is basically an upgraded DOS system. Also recognize Lieutenant Mike Stabola and Captain James Martin. Lieutenant Stabola oversees our patrol division and currently filling the role of detective to the staffing level. Captain Martin also serves as our accreditation manager and is working diligently to get us closer to the on-site assessment for CLIA accreditation. Lastly, I also want to recognize my assistant, Elizabeth Bradford. She provides the command staff and I with exceptional service and attention to detail. It's always very helpful in their budget. Last, what concerns us most about the proposed budget? Recognizing the challenges of managing a municipal peace budget for all the departments of the town and target numbers that have to be met. I'm most concerned about the significant shortage of officers, issues recruiting officers, and most important, the retention of current officers. We're authorized 17 positions in patrol, including 3 sergeants. That's tomorrow we move down 7 positions. That's 41% of our patrol staff. I have 1 in field training that will be released in mid-April, which will move us down to being 6 positions down. I have 2 that are in the academy that started in February. Will be September if all goes well, where they can begin covering a shift. There's been a nationwide trend of a lack of candidates applying for positions in law enforcement. The Hanover Police Department is no exception. Since 2020, the number of applicants has decreased sharply. In prior years, we've run a testing process. We have concerns about running out of space and testing materials. This has not been the case for the last 2 years. Our hiring process consists of a written exam, physical fitness test, oral board, and an interview with the chief. Before being selected, move on to the background process, which includes also polygraph, psychological, medical tests. Inevitably, when there is a pool of candidates scheduled for testing, some withdraw at the last minute, some fail to show up. Some fail the written exam, some fail the physical part of it, and then you're left with the remaining candidates just to finally move to the interview process. In 2017, we had 12 candidates that would move to the interview process. 2018, August of 2018, we had 6 candidates. November of 21, we had 2 candidates. We recently held a testing on Friday, February the 18th, 2022. We had 5 people confirmed to participate. Not before the testing, 1 candidate withdrew, 1 failed to show up, so we had 3 take the written test. 2 failed the written test. So we had 1 person that moved to the interview process. He passed through their oral board, passed through my interview, but the candidate withdrew from the process to take a position in Maine, and we were in no position to be able to offer a more competitive salary. We recently had a New Hampshire certified officer from a neighboring county express interest in working here. This officer worked for a small department of 3 and had 5 years experience. After factoring in starting an officer at the pay range of a 5-year Hanover officer, factoring in the hiring bonus, our incentive program. The officers said the pay cut was too much to make a change. We have been unable to remain competitive against surrounding agencies, including many of the smaller ones in our area that offer higher starting pay and more salaries and better work schedules. We have compared salaries and benefits, and we look like we come up short. Even with the $15,000 hiring bonus for New Hampshire certified officers, $10,000 hiring bonus for out-of-state certified officers, we've been unable to attract qualified candidates that aren't already making more money somewhere else, and some believe it's cost prohibitive to live in this area. The current concern is not competing with other agencies in the hiring process, but also retaining our current Hanover police officers. Morale is at an all-time low in a profession that is rarely respected today. We're not the only agency offering hiring bonuses, and for our currently New Hampshire certified officers here at the Hanover Police Department, they clearly understand that there are opportunities and incentives out there for them, not only as a law enforcement officer or another agency, but also making a career change into the private sector for better pay, benefits, or work schedules. Our current staffing situation requires our officers to work more overtime, and we've had to make adjustments to ensure that the minimum staffing levels are covered to ensure community safety. The last 8 months, we've had 2 people leave for other agencies, 2 people leave for private sector jobs, and 1 just leave. When an employee gets a 2-week notice, it takes nearly a year to replace them, and that is assuming we can hire them into the academy in a timely manner. It costs nearly $45,000 to just hire, outfit, and train a new officer, and that's just the cost for the first 7 months. We all know that hiring has affected many employers in both the private and the public sector. The raising of hourly rates in many sectors has had its effect on other sectors. Today on the Channel 3 News in Burlington, they announced the target stores are hiring up to $24 an hour. That was a full-time job. You could put that calculation of the approximately $49,000 a year. Higher than a Hanover dispatcher, a Hanover police officer. Not a lot of liability in that role, and they usually don't work a 24/7 schedule. We know that the police department is not the only department that struggles to hire and fill positions that affect most town departments are affected, including like the after-school program, difficulty in hiring those, grounds employees, have difficulty getting equipment operators, just to name a few. But I present this to you for further thought. What happens if you can't fill an open position in the after-school program? One option may be reduce the number of students, or maybe you have to cancel the after-school program. What happens if you can't hire grounds personnel? Well, one option, the weeds get taller, but the lawn doesn't get mowed, the trees don't get trimmed. Worst case scenario, you contract that work out to a landscaping company or other property maintenance company. What happens if you can't hire a heavy equipment operator? The last option may again be contract out to a heavy equipment company like the state does to do some of the snow plowing. In these 3 examples that are options, there are options to either temporarily close the program or contract work out. What happens if you can't hire a police officer or dispatcher? You can't close our patrol dispatch center that operates 24/7. And you can't hire contract police officers or contract dispatchers. They just don't exist. I say all this because we're at a critical moment, and even if we can hire someone again, it's nearly a year before they can fill the position. If we continue to lose additional officers or dispatchers, there could be an effect on coverage and services. In closing, I'd like to thank each of you as members of the select board for your continued support of all the officers and staff in the Hamilton Police Department. It is noticed and greatly appreciated. Thank you, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Thanks, Captain Dennis. For those of you who want to follow along in the budget book, the org chart and more information about the budget and very interesting stats are on page 60. No, page 38. Any questions? For the chief?
Chief, unless I heard you wrong, you indicated that morale was an issue. And I would hope that the town of Hanover receives policing work differently than what we read about in some of our larger cities. And I would hope that the police department would recognize that. Can you expand on that a little bit, or what we might do as a town to
No, I think
change that dynamic?
we certainly think our town treats our officers well. Sometimes this town may not think they need police officers as much as they do until they actually need them. So there's a little bit of that balance that we deal with. But no, I think it's just that the air that's out there on a nationwide platform of policing and looking at law enforcement We used to be looked on favorably at the beginning of the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, like a switch, it goes off, and we're compared to the same as people in Baltimore or Portland or other places too. So there is that effect that just still wears on law enforcement. And it's not just that way. If you look at the stories, and I probably see them much more than you guys do, of the number of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty, the number of ambushes. Midville, Utah, last week, there was a 4-year-old that pulled a gun on a police officer while they were making an arrest. The dad had told them to shoot the officer. So these are the type of things that are happening out here in our world, whether you're pulling over a car on a traffic stop, doesn't mean something is going to happen. But the possibility that it could happen is always real and always there. Always like to look at the example of active shooters. I've never heard of Sandy Hook before I moved to the New England area. But everyone knows what happened. So there's things that happen in towns all across the United States that they may have thought never would happen, but they can happen. And I think our officers are aware of that too, even though this town has a low crime rate, a lot of good people that live here, it doesn't mean that bad things won't happen. But they always have to be prepared that they're on their toes, and it's a lot mentally to deal with.
Thank you. I guess we should mention that as a part of this budget, we are committing to do a wage and comp study for the entire town. And part of that is clearly to address whatever market changes there have been in any department, including their own. So we're hoping to get, I think we're a little behind on that, but I think we're going to catch up fast.
Thank you.
Anything else, members? So what's keeping you up at night is that you have 60% of your staff. And I guess the big question is, what do you need in order to, cut that number, the 40%, 41%. So we said 7 positions down. It sounds like by September, you'll be down around 25%.
Down 4.
Down, you have 4 more people by September, right?
Right.
You'll be down.
Yeah, 3
You'll-
more by September, so.
So you'll need 4 new positions, and do you and your staff have creative ideas on what it's gonna take to get those 4 more positions filled?
And I think a lot of it still goes back to salary and benefits. I mean, I think those last 2 scenarios to, can attract locally from another small agency. And part of that small agency, what they can offer, that we can't offer, is they don't have to work a graveyard shift. They're just on call, so they can stay home at night, and receive an extra $200 a week, but they don't have to work graveyard shift. One of the officers that left and went to a small town, that was one of his family members. I'm tired of getting older, I'm tired of working graveyard shifts. I have another officer that's probably getting to that point too at some point. So there's some things that we can't control. Always looking at schedules could make a difference, but they're always going to have to work a graveyard shift because of the size of our community and those expectations of what the community wants. Looking at some other ideas of programs internally, what we can do differently for officer wellness and different things. And then I talked to the manager about working on some gym equipment on the PD side that would be helpful. So there's some things that we can look at internally to do differently better. But right now, and this is everywhere, salary and benefits is huge. And it's just hard to compete with these other sectors. That's no one's fault, just where we stand today. But that's the purpose of my examples of. There's other things we can cut and do without, but a dispatcher and officer, you just can't do without that.
Another thing I've noticed, Joanna, in my now almost 40 years in municipal management, is that not only has policing changed in terms of the degree of risk, in part because there's so many more firearms out there than there ever used to be, but 2 is the expectation that officers are social workers too. And in part because we continue to underfund our social services, sort of human infrastructure, human support infrastructure. The kinds of issues our police officers are often called upon to deal with, even in a community like Hanover, are really tough because so many of these young officers straight out of the academy are are suddenly thrown into a complex social service agency situation with dangerous mental health situation that may be occurring. And then they're criticized when their response isn't viewed as appropriate. So I really worry about this nation's feelings about the role of police. It's become such a lightning rod that I can imagine a lot of folks contemplating a career in public safety have got to be thinking twice about it now, because it certainly doesn't seem to be getting any easier. And I'm not sure it's honored the way it may once have been in terms of seen as a vital community role. And part of that on the compensation side, on the programmatic side, when you look at the amount of time Charlie and his staff spend investing in the training of a new officer before that individual is ready for patrol on their own. It's an expensive investment for the town. And so it's, I think the whole profession needs a real rethink in terms of how we provision the training for new officers, how communities support that training, and refining what a community's expectations of performance should be for police officers.
If you look around, when I went to the academy in 1984, our academy was 16 weeks long. That same academy is 32 weeks long nowadays in Texas. You look at the New Hampshire academy, it was 14 weeks long when I got here almost years ago. It's now 16 weeks long. So you ask, what is the difference? What are you not learning in 16 weeks at other academies? If you go to San Francisco, it's 6 months long. What are you not learning? And what I've always been told is, well, you learn the same thing, you just don't get as much of it. So what you don't get is that actual hands-on working through those problems repeatedly is becoming more second nature. In a 16-week academy, you cover a lot of stuff and you cover it quick, and you're just bombarded with that information. You're a sponge, but it's still hard to absorb all that, which is the importance of the field training program that takes place after that, which is 12 weeks long. To help cement kind of what you learned and put it into practice so it kind of all clicks and makes sense. But it's a long process.
Thank you. Thanks. Would you like to introduce your
Sure.
people and have them spawn up
On
parking?
Sergeant Ballard. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Jeff.
We'll get started with parking, but
That would be great. Thank you. Oh, no one else had any more questions, right? On the police budget?
On the police budget,
On the police budget, so we can move into parking, which is on page 44 and in the little book here.
well, good evening. I'll go ahead and get started. Our biggest challenges this past year, our staff still working within pandemic environment and a slow rebound of revenue in the parking fund. Also, one of our part-time parking garage attendants passed away unexpectedly, which is always an effect on. The drivers and major changes to the budget, again, salaries and benefits are at the top. We also have budgets to contract Destin Design Management to formulate a long-term garage maintenance plan, which will include their engineers overseeing future specialized maintenance and repairs to garage infrastructure. This is the same company that did the major construction repairs about 3 years ago, and it's made a significant difference. We're really impressed with the work that they do and look forward to the information that they can bring us and helping us keep that garage at a high level. The parking capital expenditure line items include funding for spot repairs of one leaking expansion joint in the garage, as well as funding for additional EV charging stations, completion of the lighting upgrades in the parking garage, and additional security cameras. The accomplishments we're most proud of: we continue to be proactive and progressive in looking at ways to best utilize our personnel, systems, equipment, and technology to better meet the needs of the overall Hanover parking system and that of our customers. Some of the accomplishments this year, you may have noticed the removal of over 250 single-space meters, replacing them with 20 new kiosks for a total of 34 in the town and 20 single-space meters. We changed the pay and display system, so the pay and displaying on your dash. with a pay by plate to save paper, and also make it easier for patrons to pay at the kiosk and continue to their destination rather than having to return to their vehicle. We changed 2 zones to pay by phone only. We started negotiating new pay by phone contracts with multiple vendors to give more consumer choice once our initial partnerable contract expires. We continued to update signage in our parking garage and implemented a routine maintenance program for the garage and surrounding landscape. The division continued to work on upgrading signage and wayfinding efforts throughout town. What I'm most proud of, our parking division enforcement officers do a great job monitoring our metered and permit areas. Our parking garage staff, supervised by Chris McEwen, does a fantastic job keeping the garage operating smoothly. They all strive to provide great customer service, sometimes under challenging circumstances. If you haven't seen the inside of the parking garage in a while, I encourage you to do so. I think you'll be proud of not only the cleanliness of it, but also the many improvements that have been made. Sergeant Ballard continues to do an excellent job managing the day-to-day operations of the division. You know, we're seeing major projects and improvements to the parking garage. His attention to detail and motivation to improve our parking system is impressive and valuable. What worries me most about the upcoming proposed budget? I have no concerns about this. In closing, I want to thank each of you as members of the select board for your continued support of the parking division. Just notice and appreciate it. And I'll open it up for any questions to Sergeant Ballard and myself.
Thanks, Chief. Questions from the board? Nancy.
I actually don't have a question. Mine is more an observation that I think that your staff is remarkable on how well they treat the public. And that, you know, when they when they're offering a ticket, or I've actually seen your officers, I think this goes way beyond their you know, job description. Kind of they're there with their pad, they're on Main Street. They're literally looking around to make sure that nobody is running up to them and saying, oh, don't, you know. And I'm sure that kind of courtesy towards the citizens and towards our visitors, actually, I've heard people visiting Hanover saying, wow, your parking division is really, we don't have this in fill in the blank, Seattle, Chicago, wherever it is. So
Well,
kudos to you.
thank you. I appreciate that. They do work hard with that. Again, it's not always about writing the ticket.
Right,
It's
no,
about keeping parking spots.
right,
open and moving.
turning over.
But
yes,
they pay a lot of attention to
they do.
someone working their way back and,
Yeah.
you know, given that grace and using their discretion. So they do a good job,
And
not
it-
only in the parking division, but also in our patrol division.
Yeah.
Right.
It's noticed.
So thank you.
Peter?
Just one really serious unserious net. The very first line in the parking fund, I think it's expenses of the 2 million one, right? It's not expenses and revenues. Just so the book is correct whenever it gets finally.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Am I right
that
about that?
that's just looking at a balanced budget, Peter, but
So they're gonna
Yeah,
spend
you're
2.1
right.
million
Yeah.
and
mhm,
anticipate.
right,
I think it's expenses of 2 million one.
Yeah,
I read the chart
just
correctly.
just delete and revenues. Yep.
Okay.
So I have a question for you, Jeff, in that, you know, I think we're all hopeful that we're gonna see a full rebound as, you know, as things improve and numbers improve in the pandemic. But I know that it's, I was wondering if, and maybe just from your experience or in working with Desmond, if there's any forecasting in terms of whether we'll actually get back to the parking utilization rates that we've seen in the past. I mean, I've come through town at 10 o'clock in the morning and I could have the choice of parking spaces on either side and during midweek. And so I'm just wondering if there's any projections along.
So I haven't seen anyone make any formal projections yet. I think everyone's too nervous to honestly. I think when we look at our numbers and the numbers I've really focused on are the transaction numbers, because those are so steady and it didn't, we did a rate increase in 2019, but we never even made it a full year with the new rate to see what our benchmarks were for the new parking rates we put in effect before the pandemic hit. So the transaction numbers, when I look at them going back to 2015, 2016, pretty steady. And So this year, for instance, as of like June, July, we're at about 70% of what I would say was normal transaction numbers. And we stayed at that 70 to 74% level all the way through October. And then November, we started seeing a slight decline, and then it really tanked December, January, early February. And again, as the pandemic picked back up, our numbers dropped back down again. The last 3 weeks, our numbers are starting to go back up again. So, I mean, knock on wood, this is kind of the end again, maybe, and our numbers are going to keep climbing. So, these numbers are both back like a 60, just over 60% level. So, I mean, if that rebounds quicker from low 50% back to 60 in just 3 weeks, then my hope is that we're going to be back at 70% level again. I think the other thing that really comes down to is what's Dartmouth's return to downtown. And we all know that, we thought September Dartmouth was coming back, and then we got pushed back. So like late August, we got a lot of phone calls from Dartmouth people thinking they were coming back, wanting permits again, wanting leases in the garage again, and then we got called back again, saying, never mind, we don't need those permits anymore. So I think that has a big role in it, and not just Dartmouth, obviously that's one of the bigger consumers of parking, but also other downtown businesses, a lot of offices down. Are they doing office hours 40 hours a week now versus a couple hours a week, where they're just actually meeting clients? So the parking garage is obviously been the biggest hit of all this, because just like you said, you can come down at 10 o'clock in the morning, park wherever you want, why go to the parking garage?
Right.
And so we pushed to, again, open up short-term leases and utilize those public spaces as much as we can. And we already have people calling and asking if we're still going to offer them through March and April or not. So at this point, we're still offering, and we're literally doing it month by month and evaluating the third week of the month where we're at for public demand, making sure that, we know that was part of the big last resident study needed for the overall parking system, was making sure we had more public spaces in the garage and less permit spaces. Well, that obviously went away, and so I think we need to make sure that we can offer public spaces again when the demand returns.
So the bottom line is that flexibility is critical in order to meet the budget projections, and that we're looking.
And so what we're seeing is while the public side of the garage is down, the permanent side leases is way up, because we've added those extra things to try to come back along.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Oh, wait. Kari had a quick question.
Yeah.
Or question.
You need to go by the microphone.
Right, I don't want to.
No, we understand, Kara, yeah.
Okay, I hope people can hear me. So I just wanted to touch on the revenues a bit more, because I know that last year that was such a concern. And I just wanted to first of all clarify that on page 46, the fiscal year 22 budget number of 1.79 million. Is that what was adopted, or is that what's currently projected? That's what was adopted.
Right.
And do we have a sense for, at this point, are we going to meet that number, exceed that number? How are we looking?
I think we'll be close to meeting it. And again, it comes and goes. I mean, if you said in October we'll meet it, I would thought no problem. After December, January, I was a lot more hesitant. Now that we're rebounding again, I think we'll meet it, or come pretty close to it. And assuming there's not a new variant that pops up that shuts everything down again.
Okay, and then I did notice, that the net between what's also been proposed for the fiscal year 23 budget in terms of revenues and in terms of expenses, then I mean, that's shown. I'm sorry, I can't lick my fingers and turn the pages right so quickly, but then on page 48, we see that the number is $18,469. And I was going to say that should be a negative number to that, so that should be in parentheses. Because it looks like, from this, it looks like we were thinking that the revenues would be $18,000 further than the expenses, but actually we're saying negative, right? That we would be talking about needing to transfer $18,000 from undesignated fund balance. To balance that, if those
Right.
numbers don't come out.
Last year, 2022 budget, the revenues were higher than the expenditures, and it was a negative number.
Okay.
It's back
I
in
see.
track.
It's back.
It's in code. It's our new system.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'd say that's not really intuitive, but if
Right.
you learn that's how to look at it. then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, okay.
It's been a learning curve for all of us, Kari, as we've had to sort of get used to this new presentation format, so.
Yeah, I've not seen, but
Yep.
never presented that way.
Right.
Previously, so thank you for, yeah, and, okay, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, so Ruby should be popping up on the Zoom screen here. Yeah, Ruby Simon. Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, yes, I, Nancy Carter, am responsible for our libraries at this point. Ruby Simon
Here's
who
Ruby
is
coming in
coming
here.
in from home, our athletic
Yes.
library, head of library services. Hi, Ruby. On one of our most beautiful area ski trails is now at home, not functioning fully, but a full recovery, literally hours from now, we hope. And so let me direct it to.
Hey, Ruby, can you say something? Can we hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
No, we can't hear her.
Oh,
Hold on.
I'm unmuted.
She is unmuted according to my screen.
Although
Okay,
you do sound staticky.
Okay, try that. How's that, Ruby?
Yeah, can you hear me?
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds better because you
Yep.
all were sounding staticky as well.
Finish of my.
Yep, go ahead, Nancy. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah,
we
no,
could-
no, no, no,
yep,
no. When we turn it over to her, we can
Yep, yep,
actually hear.
yep, understood.
Hi, Ruby. Thank you for joining. tonight. And I wanted to direct everybody's attention to page 50, which is where Ruby's narrative for the house will take us through her challenges and the things that she's proud of, the same way that Chief just did. I wanted to alert everyone to the fact that in Ruby's presentation, you will not hear anything about the retro commissioning, which you heard from me during this past year. That's because all of the work in the infrastructure, we have several proposals and we have several studies going on right now about the building, the infrastructure, insulation, windows and so forth. That is all being done under the Howe board and their budget. So there are no budgetary implications for the townspeople. So that won't be, you may wonder about the building, but Ruby won't be covering it because it is a board cost. Thank you, ma'am. Turn it over to the head librarian.
And I don't know if you should have started with my athletic abilities because clearly that was not what happened yesterday. This is not how I intended to do my budget meeting, but it could have always been a lot more worse. So I think we're in a good place just where we are right now. So and I have to say DHMC has been awesome. So thank goodness they are here and we have that. So I will start with my presentation and obviously questions, biggest challenges. And that was interesting as I was putting this together because I think compared to where we were the last 2 years, I have to say I'm going to be on a half full glass on that one just because I think where we are right now is it feels in a good place compared to the last 2 years. This was another very interesting year for the Howe. We were closed, as you know, for most of, all of 2020 and strive to maintain as many of our services at full capacity. As you all know, the library was finally able to open its doors in early August of 2021. Staff was 100% vaccinated, building was modified with necessary screening furnishings, and PPE supplies were made available. Our staff and community were ready for us to be open. We held as many programs as possible outdoors and transitioned most of them to virtual, knowing that many were still comfortable. We're still not comfortable congregating in groups indoors. Fortunately, we were gradually moving to a semblance of normalcy, is what I think our staff is feeling now. I think our biggest challenge was just not knowing what was going to happen with COVID, even in the in the current where we are now. The best we could do was to keep our services as consistent and stable as possible, so staff felt secure and had clear directives on what to expect every day they came into work. And that was, I think, for at least supervisors, those were our primary priorities for this, I would say the last 2 years, and even going into this year as we opened, because we knew that was going to be a transition and, a little bit rusty doing the interface with the public again and not knowing what that was going to feel like. So what are we looking for going forward for the upcoming year? And I think, in this upcoming budget, we're asking to move the head of youth services position status from part-time to full-time. The current staff member is retiring in a couple of months after 25 plus years. Due to her many years of service, her salary costs are comparable to full-time position and will not impact the budget. The youth department has been struggling with short staffing for many years, and changing this position to full-time will have a significant impact on the output of our services and allow us to offer more quality programming, outreach, as well as alleviate staffing challenges. Other than the stated changes, there are no significant staffing changes. Although one of our primary concerns, probably similar to the police department for the upcoming year, is our search process for both the head of youth services and teen librarian. We expect to do a national search since these positions are both critical to a public library services as it is the key point of where we begin fundamental literacy development and lifelong library users and readers. We are aware that the job market is in a somewhat precarious state, as is the housing in the Upper Valley area. Our other request is that we are also asking to have the library no longer take fines and allow the Howe Library to become one of the many fine-free libraries in the country. In the last several years, we've seen fine revenues decrease even pre-COVID. After a year of not taking fines, the library, while we were closed, the library updated its procedures by having a stricter threshold on due dates and sending out notifications and reminders to patrons, and we did see positive results on our returns. Also, almost all of the Upper Valley Library affiliates are no longer taking fines after research has shown that fines were not an incentive for patrons to return books on time, and if anything, it is a deterrent to library users wanting to return their library items. And we know, one of our bigger revenues is our non-resident memberships. So we did see, that was kind of up and down during COVID, but I think this is also an incentive possibly to have more people want to renew that membership and get new members also purchase a car that are non-residents. And finally, what are we most proud of in terms of our department's accomplishments over the past year? Most importantly, we were fortunate that all of our staff have stayed healthy considering the challenges of COVID in the past 2 years, knock on wood. It was clear that all of the research and workshops we attended in terms of workplace protocols around COVID, we implemented worked. This has allowed us to be able to open our doors with little or no issues. It's been great to see and hear how grateful and excited our patrons are to be able to browse our stacks and have access to all of our new collections offerings. Although our numbers are not totally on par to where we were pre-COVID, our numbers were on mark with what other libraries were seeing throughout the state. Out of the 214 public libraries in the state, we were the 9th highest circulating public library in 2020. Even with our doors closed the previous fiscal year, the House circulated over 130,000 items. I have to say, we were really proud of the fact that we were able to ensure the best possible access of our resources to the community. And in that data gathering, it was very revealing to understand the fact that 30% dip in our numbers was primarily because people didn't have access to the physical building, which also helped me understand that, staffing is key, web presence was also key, and our catalog were like the three fundamental items in making sure that, that's a high number of our circulation that was based on, I think, those three services that we were able to be consistent in offering even with our doors closed. So 30% drop was interesting to see that was probably primarily the fact that the building was closed. Also kind of seeing that we're the highest circulating public library in the state was also very revealing. We've been monitoring that, and even though we're somewhat, I think the ones that are above us are definitely the much larger libraries down south, but it just shows just what a high traffic and high use library we are in terms of our collections and the services that we offer. As for programming, our patrons also benefited from our staff's creative ability to transition. Staff made great use of our new Zoom owls that were purchased through the first round of the state opera funds, which allowed us to offer hybrid programming as we maneuvered through the various waves of the virus variants. Always trying to stay ahead of what we would need to do to ensure we could continue offering consistent and stable services. I think that was our priority throughout the last couple of years, just trying to stay as consistent so people understood what was available for them. We were able to offer book group discussions, ESL conversation groups, our Sunday Shakespeare groups, and added the Sherlock Holmes Club to the many other offerings. Our Eldon Murray photo contests and garden club shows were even bigger hits under the virtual format, having over 100 attendees. We also had a great summer partnership with Parks and Rec, where we brought in a broad range of world music bands to the farmers market, artisans who came to exhibit their crafts, and gave out free books to kids and family at our library booth. We hope to do the same this year and partner with Parks and Rec on their upcoming summer picnic series, and also with Jeff and Sarah at the Etna Library for our summer reading program. We've been really excited to be able to work with Jeff, and he's been a great addition to kind of our library world here in Hanover. And finally, our most exciting project that we're also looking forward towards this year, we are very thrilled to have been awarded in the second round of the ARPA grants, giving us the ability to purchase and incorporate a Zoom room at the library. We are partnering with Northern Stage and CATV this year to create new programming by using the Zoom room technology. We're not sure, but we think that we may be the first in the Upper Valley to have a Zoom room. We're on the search to see if there's anybody else that may have one. So if any of you know of anyone that may have a Zoom room, please let us know. So it'd be great to see what they're doing and also collaborate. And I guess in closing, every year I get thank you messages about the work and services that our staff does. I think, as we all know, these last 2 years were obviously very different from the years in the past. And I just wanted to read one of our recent emails that felt extra special and affirmed the impact that that we're doing as a library and our staff. So I'm going to read this real quickly. Dear Jared, thank you for responding to my email I sent this week about collaborating on another program. P.S. My mother passed away over the weekend. Even though she was 96 years old and I had months to prepare for her death, loss is still tough. I am grateful for the Reading Upwards book group and the inspiration which provided me with opportunities for immersing myself in works that deal with life and death issues. Thank you for starting the Reading Upward groups and for continuing to find fascinating works for us to connect with. With warm regards, Rosie. And that Upwards reading group started right before COVID. We didn't know if it was going to kind of be popular or not, but I think it was perfect timing under COVID. And it was interesting to see how many people needed that and joined the group. And we've gotten great feedback on that. And I think just other programs that we were able to continue offering to keep people engaged and not feel as isolated. So again, we're excited to be open again, and we've learned a lot in the last couple of years in the process. And I think the exciting part is to be able to use both virtual and back in person to see what we're able to do for the upcoming year. And I think the exciting part, as much as is, it's always difficult to lose a staff member who's been here for a long time, and you see them, take that institutional knowledge, but we're also, I think, excited about the potential opportunities just for new ideas and new projects. So I think that's my presentation. So any questions, thoughts?
Thank you, Ruby. Board members, I have none for Ruby. But I've had the advantage of being able to talk to her all day today, so.
Billy, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
I do. So Ruby, what's a Zoom room?
So the Zoom room, so as you guys have, we have the owls too, and those work for smaller meetings. So the Zoom room is like a broader setup, and it's got cameras, AV, It's almost like surround sound, but it's a lot more precise, and it functions better for large group gatherings. So if we want to have like a larger presentation or multiple people presenting or doing a panel discussion, you can have people, probably smaller group, because I'm sure we're still not going to have large congregating rooms, but um, it allows for it to be able to function and capture kind of everyone more. It's a better multitasker than the Zoom owls, because Zoom owls can only kind of do a couple of things at one time. Obviously, as we get through COVID, this I think just the fact that we've realized that virtual also allows us to go beyond just our state, or even out of the country, and just get a whole different level of attendance. So we're hoping, with even once we're able to congregate and be together in large groups, that this still gives us the broader accessibility to be able to offer bigger programs through the Zoom room. So we're still figuring out like all of what it can do, but it's definitely much more sophisticated than the Zoom owls. One of the things that we put in our grant application is that we hope to, once our staff gets fully trained on it, that we hope to make it available to other, obviously, like community boards and town committees, and also other, like whether it's the schools or other organizations that need this type of technology to, also be able to, broaden their access.
Thanks, Ruby.
I don't know if that was helpful, but we're still figuring it out. But I know it's a lot more sophisticated than the Zoom owls, and it can just do, I think, bigger and broader programming.
Ruby, I'm struck by the fact that it's probably the kind of thing that once we get going, there will be a multiplying effect, and a year, 2 years from now, we'll all look at one another and go, how did we ever get along without
Without a
Ruby's
Zoom
Zoom
room?
room?
Well, I think today's a perfect example, right? I was like,
Yes.
oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to come in. So if I have to, I will. But yeah, I think without Zoom, this definitely we would not be able to do what we're doing. So
Thank you, Ruby.
thanks.
And a quick conversation about the Etna Library.
Yeah, Jeff Metzler is here.
Would you
So
like to come up to
Jeff,
the
come on
mic,
up.
Jeff?
Ruby, stay with us, and just in case they're all-purpose library questions.
Yeah. So other years, you've all had the opportunity to meet with Barbara Prince, and Jeff is her replacement, and your first budget year, and I'm grateful that you came by.
Thank you, good to be here.
Thanks, Jeff. Go right ahead.
So yes, my name is Jeff Metzler, and in October of 2021, I did become Etna Library's librarian, taking over for Barbara Prince, who had been in the position for over 20 years. I had a week of overlap training with Barbara before she left for the warmer climates of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. During that first week, many of the patrons I met at the library told me that I had big shoes to fill with Barbara leaving, and it's true, it's definitely true. But I worked hard over my first 5 months in this role, both continue with what's always made the Etna Library special, as well as try to make some updates that serve the library's patrons in new ways. I've really come to love the Etna Library in a very short period. Its charm and its history. I've also really been amazed by the kindness and the generosity of the community. The library is open 32 hours a week, staffed by myself and assistant librarian Sarah Goldberg. We have 2 substitutes, Mary Ellen Ruthie and Stephanie Snelling, and also a small army of really terrific volunteers. Over the past few months, we've been starting to having volunteers staff at the library from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. on Saturdays. This is something that the library had long done previously, but had stopped during the pandemic. So it's great to get back to that, and volunteers are very happy to be back in the library, volunteering directly among the books again in the library. We also have couriers that transport materials directly from our library to Etna Library, bypassing the interlibrary loan for the state, so we can get items back and forth very quickly. We had 3 couriers when I started, and I've added another 2, so we have couriers 5 days a week now, making those trips back and forth. We also have volunteers that make us signs, volunteers that do the gardening,
with the library, so it's really amazing everything the community does to help make the library the best library that it can be. Numbers of patrons visiting the library have been consistent since I became librarian. They've also risen substantially from the earlier part of this fiscal year when, as Ruby was talking about, because of COVID, the library was mainly open for contactless pickup service out on the table in front of the library. Our circulation numbers have also remained steady. The library works hard to reach community members in a number of different ways. But again, as Ruby was talking about with the pandemic going on, we've tried to reach people through Zoom and remotely more than ever before, and try to balance a hybrid approach where people can feel comfortable in person in the library while also reaching people beyond the library's walls. So we offer 2 story times every week at the library on Mondays and Fridays. During the warmer months when I started, those were held outside in the sun by the front porch of the library, which was a really great spot to have those. And since the cold weather moved in, we've been doing those over Zoom. We've also started incorporating crafts into our story time. This is another practice that had long been common at the library, but was kind of put on hiatus during the pandemic. So once again, it's great to be having crafts reintroduced into the story time. We have them set up as kind of grab and go, so people can come into the library, and then Sarah Holsworth and myself will demonstrate the craft during story times, and families can kind of do the craft on their own time at home or along with us during that story time on Zoom. Sarah Holsworth definitely takes the lead on the craft designing, and she set up amazing crafts like ice ornaments, Valentine's Day kits, bookmark making plans and kits. So it's been really great for people to be able to do those crafts on their own time and kind of connect them more with the library. Planning crafts is a very time-consuming process, and Sarah has told me that when the library had previously been doing crafts, she was working kind of off the clock a lot to try to get the crafts made in time, do a great job on them. So for this reason, I requested 1 extra hour per week to be added to Sarah's schedule in the upcoming fiscal year. Since I became librarian, we've done a pumpkin decorating contest, which was a lot of fun. We got pumpkins from the co-op, and we made up kits where people could come and pick them up and put stickers and glitter and all manner of decorations on their pumpkins, and did a drawing from the photos that were submitted of decorated pumpkins for a gift card to Stillmore Books. We've also done Zoom discussion with the New York Times bestselling author Mary Roach, which was very well attended. And it's a great event to be able to speak with her. We held a Gaelic Americana music concert again over Zoom. And just last week, we hosted author Anders Morley, who told us about his adventures across the country, skiing across Canada. So trying to get a diverse number of guests to talk with over Zoom, and just really diverse programming that can attract people from kind of all different age groups and interests. So the loyalty and support of the library patrons is a strong indication that this library has long served its community well. Ways that the library can provide new services and further improve our offerings are reflected in my budget requests. And almost all the budget lines for the library, I'm asking for the same budget as this current fiscal year for the upcoming fiscal year. These include the ever important circulating items budget line items, which is what we use to order all our circulating materials, and our programming budget. It's important to note that the largest change in the budget from this fiscal year to the upcoming one is that the $11,780 charge from the High Library to the Upper Library is being removed. And this is because I've taken on all the ordering, cataloging, and processing of new materials that Hal had traditionally done for Barbara. All these tests turn out to perform the concept that in the library. In terms of other requested changes to the budget, I've asked for $300 so that I can launch and maintain a dedicated Etna Library website that serves as a virtual hub for everything the library has to offer and can better showcase our upcoming events and all the essential information such as hours and access to our catalog, history of the library, and other patrons routinely search for. In 2013, a beautiful addition was built onto the original 1905 library building. This addition has mainly been used as an empty entranceway, however, or as a place for storage. I think this addition has a lot of potential to house books and new shelving that really displays new materials in an exciting way that greet people as soon as they walk into the door. So I've added a new budget line item this year for building equipment that will for $4,265 for new shelving for this purpose. I'd also like to better serve patrons using the computer in the library, accessing the internet there by untethering them from our desktop PC that we currently have and providing a laptop that they can use anywhere in the library building. This is in the budget as a one-time $800 charge. And the upcoming fiscal year, the Etna Library will continue to strive to serve the public, encouraging usage by adding both popular and unexpected materials to our collections, continuing to offer a variety of programs and events, supporting our current groups and launching new ones, and by making the most of the library space, showcasing its rich history and displaying our collections as appealingly as possible. I really feel fortunate to be at this library in this role and as part of this community. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and I am open to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jeff. Board? Yeah.
Just, it's not in your budget, but it satisfies my curiosity. Solar tracker for electricity, it's part of the, again, quality improvement of the structure.
Right.
What's the projection on how much, electricity can be produced off of that? Do you
I
have any?
really don't have that information. I know it's in the works.
Right.
Are you working on? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's intended to serve 80% of the electricity demand, Jeff.
Yeah.
Soleflect actually gave us an estimate to put 2 trackers up, and we thought, let's start with the one and see how that goes. The southern exposure in the location they've targeted is ideal. So not only is it a great place to generate almost all of the electricity the library uses, but we're also in the process of installing heat pumps at the library, which will feed off a tracker ultimately. And secondly, because it's so visible in the village, anything we can do to sort of promote the tracker solar opportunity, I think is another nice thing that the town can be doing to walk the talk.
Thanks.
Could we eventually have EV stations for Etna patients?
Yeah,
patrons?
we're actually looking now, we're working on a regional plan for EV charging units with the city of Lebanon and the town of Hartford, Nancy, and at the library is one location for a possible EV charging station.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff, and we wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, you must know you have made several fans amongst the book group people.
Oh,
I speak personally with that. I mean, I know someone who can speak.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good start.
And Ruby, unless you're absolutely spellbound by the rest of the evening, you're very welcome to sign off and take good care of yourself.
Thank you. Yep, I'm gonna go take my leg somewhere else now.
Prop it up even higher.
Yeah, it's like a whole other attachment now.
Oh, Ruby.
Be well.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
I'm up next, actually. Before you want to come join us? Where's budget starts on page 57. And I think we've got some interesting initiatives here that you're going to tell us about as well.
Yeah, good evening. I guess we can can start by talking about some of the challenges that we faced over the last year, and that will sort of lead us into some of the stuff we're doing. And I think if you look at the news, you can probably figure out what we're doing. And that is cybersecurity. It's always a concern. It grows every day. They get smarter, so we have to try to get smarter with them. One of the things that is in the budget for next year is a new security suite that we're pretty excited about, that will help with some of those things. It also comes with some training for our staff, which we can hope that we can get staff a little smarter on the fishing expeditions that we see all the time. So that'll be a new development that we'll put in place and start that training when we get it. The other big item in the budget that Julie alluded to earlier is the website revamp, which is a big number, but I think it's our website is sorely needed an update, and it's very visible. It's an attempt to get some of the departments, as you heard Jeff talk about. He wants to do his own website so that he can do the things he wants to do. We've got Recreation with their own website. We've got Library with their own website. Hopefully, this is an attempt to get them to come back together on one website. It'll have the means to do a lot of those things that they're looking for elsewhere now. So I think it's a worthy investment. What are we looking at going forward? Again, working on this new security package. It should be pretty exciting. It'll be something new that we've never done before. I think it'll be helpful for us and for users. What have we been most proud of? One of the things we just took advantage of was a free EPA security assessment that was mostly designed to look at our water and wastewater facilities. And we're just finishing that up now. We've done this and one other one in the last 2 years. And both times we've come out with very high scores with very little to look at and very little to do going forward. So it was sort of nice to hear that we're doing some of the right things already without having to be told. Other than that, there's not a lot of big jumps in the budget. Hardware is down a little bit, and that's simply because the difference in the number of computers going out in this particular year. Everything else is pretty stagnant.
Let's see, you're working on 45 computers this year,
Yeah,
and each one's a challenge, is it not?
each one is its own animal. Yes, depends on the person and what software they run. Yeah.
Very straightforward.
I think it's awesome that we're investing in a new website. Congratulations. I think it's long in coming. I think we'll all appreciate it. And so, kudos to you and your team for making that a priority.
Some work and some input from all the departments.
Well, and it's so Virtual Town Hall became Civic Plus.
Yeah.
And we started with Virtual Town Hall. We've grown with them, and they've come up with a new sort of revamped, overhauled, more powerful platform. And Corey said now they've implemented enough of these. It's time to think about migrating. So yes, he's right. It's going to be a lot of work, but now that we have a tried and true product, and Corey works with this installer, with this company all the time, as does Carrie Osgood. It should be a game changer for us in terms of what we can offer.
Great, thanks.
When I was looking at this budget, communicating with Corey today, I told him this budget is actually up on a percentage basis much more than any of our other budgets. I also told him I thought each of your initiatives would be very highly welcomed, and that there'd be very little kickback.
Yeah.
These are all
Yeah,
projects we
really
recognize
important.
need to be done, and we're glad we're getting on them.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Corey.
Corey, you too.
Corey, as you're walking out, could you like tag Norm and have him come in?
Yeah,
There we go.
yeah, thank you.
Tag team,
It's
budget.
actually Dave is next. No, it's Norm. It's Norm, sorry. Yeah.
We can see you standing right there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it, Mark.
Hi, Norm.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Nice straightforward presentation. It starts on page 60 in the budget book. It's been a busy year
Yeah.
and then some. Why don't you tell us about it?
Well, it's been a trying year for sure.
Yeah, it has been.
With doing all the data verification in-house, and then working with vision appraisal, and overseeing what they did, and doing it in a COVID environment where I would be in the car with the folks driving around and talking about things. It was done a little differently. They were consulting with me from far away, basically. So that was a little different. But we made it through. We had the first go around and we listened to the people, did the informal reviews, and realized that they're talking with the vice president of operations, and both decided that we needed to go back to the drawing board, and we stopped the process and went back to the drawing board and fixed it and released the values. And I think we met with 100 and something people, but some of them the same people we had met with in August. And we got the tax bills out, got the tax rate set. And obviously we've had some complaints to the Board of Tax and Land Appeals, which has gone, we've responded to that as of today, to the petitioner's complaint. The Department of Revenue is in the final stages of reviewing our use path report, which is the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, which looks at all the various guidelines that are established to complete a mass appraisal. And we had one outstanding item, and as of about 15 minutes ago, that was answered. And so we expect to have full compliance with that, with the Department of Revenue. And to move on, right now we have, tomorrow is the deadline for abatements, and we have 33 right now, which in 2018, after the revaluation, it was almost 400. So I think we're on the right track. Even though we've had even publicity talking about go file your abatement, go file your abatement. We've dealt with people as they come along and give them more appropriate answers, and all the information is out there. It's transparent, it's public. All the reports are out there, and they can decide for themselves if they think they're being assessed. In terms of our budget, it's actually down a little bit. Pretty simple budget. It's mostly made up of personnel. We give Corey a little money for our software support. We have a little bit of training money in there. We have to be certified. I had to be recertified this year. Every 5 years, we have to have so many credit hours and have different coursework. And they've actually upped the ante on that. The Assessing Standards Board seems to keep making a professional level to a higher standard, which requires more coursework. And right now we're bringing Adrian along to see a lot of courses under her belt already, but there's several more she has to take. So the training budget, I think, went from 2,000 to a little over 3,000, and mileage is where it is, and there's not much else to it. We have books and periodicals and couple of long to near end, and knowing to do the real estate network, the MLS pretty much, and that's about it.
Great. Thanks. Go ahead, Pete. I know you have questions.
Norm, as you As you know, after as we went into this revaluation, we had two primary goals. One was to get it right, and the second was to rebuild trust in the system. And I think you've accomplished both. And part of that was your willingness and experience and wisdom to, when you got that first initial feedback after the first informal interviews, you were willing to step back and say, well, maybe we don't have it right. And you took the time to make it right. And then you added a consultant on top of that to double check that we had it right. And I think that all pays off very well when we can, in our discussions with the public. And so I know there is still some controversy, but I think we will withstand that well. And I think we did get it right. And I think we have rebuilt trust in the system. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, and yeah, that's the most important thing. I think we've done it in a relatively short period of time, and we'll continue to do that and listen to the people. And that's probably the most important thing that we do is listen to what the people have to say, because there's a lot of perspectives out there, and we gain more knowledge about the happenings within the market, with the buyers and the sellers and people that live here, what their perspective is. And that's part of the nuance of doing what we do. It takes away from the science and works on the art side of things. Is we have to take into consideration those nuances.
Well, congratulations, Norm and Adrian and Sue. I mean, it's been quite a year, so.
That's great.
And
Yeah,
then some, so.
I have a great staff, very dedicated, and just there to make sure that we do a good job. So, thank you, and I appreciate the support.
Thanks for coming in.
See, Tina, I should ask for that 10%.
You would ask for more than 19 million. No, you heard that, did you?
Thanks,
You asked
Norm.
for that extra 10%, we would have asked for more than 19 million. We know how to do this now. Okay,
Dave, come on up.
yeah, I think so. Take a 5-minute break.
You want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes.
Bio break.
Just stretch.
Yep, yep.
And we'll come back at it. Come back at it at quarter.
Can eat your pizza. Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm thinking send Mike home. Yeah, poor Mike.
How was my Saturday? You always come from around. And then the fact that this meeting's for continue to reiterate. Oh, I'm sorry. Trying to make the most convincing arguments to bring people along.
Once it's divided area.
You know, the tax levy, is the same thing as a tax.
I'm really seeing.
But I couldn't find it. Yeah, because I couldn't. And with this, yeah, that's just the general one. I can find it. She's not that clear. Okay.
Thanks.
I don't know.
I also think your rookie year.
So let me, okay, I will double check that tomorrow. Okay, yeah, because I couldn't quite,
Yeah.
and then the other one was just that, it does say anticipated growth and that's, she said 19.3, not 9 million.
Right, right, and I think because the sheet that really originally got, this number was pulling a calculation, and some, these were all correct, but this was pulling from something, it wasn't a flat,
So it should be 19.
it should be not.
It should not. So then, but then also, then in the. Yeah, in her overview letter, in her overview letter on revenues here, it should also say,
Yeah.
9. Okay. Okay, and so since the schools, like, we had told the schools, or Norm had told the schools that he was anticipating it would be 15 million. So the tax rate, I mean, so.
See, and what he, I know, see, and I don't understand, 'cause all he gave, and that's what I have to do with him, because all he gave me was just a sticky note with what he thinks the valuation's gonna be. So I took what it was last year,
Right,
and it comes out about
9 million.
Right.
But I know that, when JT, specifically asked him what number to use at the select board here, discussed it with, last fall when they were putting this together. He said that it was going to be 15 million.
15 was with the revamp, that's not this year's.
Yeah, no, I know it was last year, but he said that he thought it would be the same for this coming year. I know that you're right,
Oh.
that in tax year 21, it was 15 million, and he thought it would be the same this year. And then when she said 19.3, and you're here,
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
double check,
I mean, absolutely.
and I will, make sure that, that, yeah, if the school district next year doesn't make the tax rate target, if it's because, they got information that was expected to be, $50 million growth, and we're only 9, they really are responsible for that, and
Right.
right.
Right, yep, no, I will verify that.
Okay. Yeah, oh, that's right. It would be nice if it were 15,
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, that's, I thought mine was 12.
Well, yeah. I mean, it has been 8, a couple times, but that was also with everything being the lower valuation.
Right. Yeah, so I'll double check, so don't change anything on that sheet.
Right, it would affect the.
I
affect the tax rate.
am going to fight,
Affect,
Decision today.
yeah.
I'm going to fight against it because I'm still waiting for the recreation fund, and I'm sick of this, having served on the society board and had to build this golf that they kind of
Because those guys.
assessment, as far as I can tell.
No, it's there.
Okay, there's a lot of people who are just sitting in the building,
Yeah, so anyway,
having a pickleball
but I do apologize.
thing, but is that the best use for basically building it. So, I mean, that's not tonight, that's tomorrow night, but I'm gonna still build up. I want to plan. What are we doing? Not just what the loudest voice has said. So,
It's getting late, but still.
They're all, it is
Yes, and I think that
That
this
that's
is.
what I was-
Okay.
Yes, and I think it's a positive number because that's what happens. I just put these in, these are the discussions.
All right.
Okay, we're like not quite halfway.
I don't-
I said, we're not quite halfway.
Yeah, most of the other ones are shorter.
These are fast, yeah.
Sorry
All
about
right, Tina, Kai, we're ready to go.
that. Apologize for my chatty liver.
Who's next?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have human resources.
I gotta check my library.
Okay, just wait a minute. Are we on here? Because we lost our TV person.
Yeah, because you'd said 7, well, yeah. I think we're on.
Do you see him out in the hallway by any chance, Dave?
I can go. Does it look like we're on TV?
Looks like we are on. I just don't know if they can.
Well, we're
I think
currently
he
on
has to,
Zoom.
I think he has to, I think he has to press a couple buttons to make it.
You can go to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I gotta see where.
Oh, well.
One of you spoke.
Here it goes. Ready to go?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Yeah.
Yeah, we just need you to hit the button to focus on the speaker.
Thank you.
Okay, well, okay, so we're going to talk about the human resource budget. Dave, welcome. And obviously, when you go to the budget book on page 64 starts this section, but it's not, your budget is very small because it just shows on the staffing. The real issues are hiring, cost of benefits, the bigger picture. And so please opine as appropriate.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dave Stewart, Human Resources Director for the town, and I think what I'd like to start out with is just thanking our workforce for their perseverance this past year. Actually, really, since this pandemic began, I have had the privilege of working with department heads and employees in each department as well too, who have gone above and beyond in terms of being able to work under restrictive at times adverse circumstances, and in some cases having to put their health not entirely at risk, at least to some degree, recognizing that they have work to do that, earlier in the pandemic where they could not stay at home and they could not avoid interacting with people. Perhaps that sounds basic, but it is really the testament to our employees that they have really just kept going and not just that, but really doing great work for the town in each department. And I just wanted to start there. In terms of our challenges, or the challenges that I see for the town workforce, and the police chief alluded to some of those. I could sort of look at that on a larger scale, but just the overall challenges in this economy, which is still seeing the effects of COVID-19 in terms of the effect on the job market, the fact that employees around the country are choosing to leave their jobs, looking for employment that pays better or is more satisfying. So it becomes even more of a challenge for us, which I think we are up to ensure that we are providing the best the environment in which employees work, and also a really good total compensation package, which I think we have provided and we continue to. But we also have to be mindful in considering these things about the impact on the tax rates and how it affects the communities. I think from a recruiting and retention standpoint, there is just such fierce competition among municipalities now and local governments for employees. What I am heartened to see is that in many of our departments, despite the smaller applicant pools and the fact that people could choose to vote with their feet to go elsewhere where they might obtain, in some cases, higher pay in the private sector, that hasn't happened, and we have been able to secure or get new employees on board who have added a great deal to the town, and even from those smaller pools. I think, you know, in terms of challenges that we have going forward, there's always the uncertainty around healthcare costs and the cost of benefits going forward. We are hopeful that the GMR, guaranteed maximum rate increase for health insurance, that's forecast for the next fiscal year will come down in terms of the actual final rates. But as is true, has been true for several years now, we can never entirely be sure how that is going to shake out. For that reason, I am grateful to our unions for having agreed a couple of contract cycles ago to provisions that allow us to reopen the entire agreement if necessary in the event that healthcare expenses, health insurance expenses exceed 10%. Other challenges too, I think really what I'm seeing is employees who are resilient, but at the same time also are tired. I'm seeing the cumulative effects of the pandemic really everywhere. I think where that really shows up is just with people being tired. Sometimes fuses can run short. Small items of disagreement can become larger, but I want to be careful not to suggest that that's the case across the board by any means. I think our employees have worked really hard to keep their morale up as much as possible, and at the same time, when disputes do happen, I've been so impressed about our employees' ability to work together to try to solve them and in a way that works for everybody. So, further questions?
I know we've talked about a compensation review, which it's been several years, so the select board certainly is supportive of that commitment
Yes.
of work to evaluate where are we today, because we know the markets have
Yep.
moved at a rapid rate. So
And I was gonna add that I'm very much looking forward to our moving forward with that in the next fiscal year. Part of the challenge is that some of the changes that we're seeing in the area of compensation have happened very suddenly. There've been it's not something where sort of over time the market and the wages have changed so much as the effects of COVID and the great resignation, so to speak, have taken hold. There's been a move to move very quickly on wages, which then rightfully requires us to then take a look at where we are in comparison. But also, I think being careful to take into consideration that we, as Julia's alluded to, we don't know what the economic forecast really is going to be in the next 12 to 24 months, and we want to be sure that we're paying wages that are competitive and that show how much we value our employees, but at the same time is actually, to the extent we're looking at things like cost of living, that we're responding to long-term circumstances and not just short-term ones. And I also just want to add how much normally if we were not trying to limit the number of people in the room, my colleague Dee Maurer would be with me today, and she has been just a fantastic addition to the department, and is really she's brought all kinds of capabilities with her. It's been a quick study in the areas that she's needed to learn, and just want to give a quick shout out to her for all the help she's provided, me and to all employees of the town this year.
Questions? Other members of the board? Kari, you have a-
Yes, so I was just wondering, where the line item was for the compensation review study?
there's not, oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Julie.
not in this budget.
No, I've given it to the board as a potential additional expenditure to be funded from undesignated fund balance current.
Like what is the amount that we think it would be?
30,000.
30,000.
That's what I put in
And when was the last time we did one of these?
7 years ago.
7 years ago?
Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2015,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know it was before I was on the finance
Yeah.
committee, so that kind of helped me.
You know,
somewhat.
in the ideal world, you do them every 5 years. And we opted, tough time to be doing one heading right into the mouth of a pandemic. So we said, this is not the time to be looking. Now, as we come out of the pandemic and we see the sort of shock impact on wages, it's also a scary time to be doing it, but the board and I agreed it's time to take a comprehensive look, not just at one group of employees, but all of our municipal employees.
I know on the finance committee, one of the things that we have sometimes wondered about, and we understand that if somebody is looking at being employed by one municipality versus another one, that they're the same retirement benefits and, more or less the same health benefits. But we wondered to what extent highlighting those benefits maybe would draw somebody to a municipal position versus private, and whether or not there's a way to highlight that benefit of being a municipal employee.
Are very much preaching to the choir in terms of thinking about how we're going to recruit going forward. I think being able to emphasize the total compensation package that we have with respect to health insurance, long-term disability, short-term disability, life insurance. There's a lot to our benefits package, which there are some communities who provide something comparable, but in looking at the larger picture of the sort of benefits world, so to speak, we do quite well and get good value that is that has cost containment as well too.
One of the challenges though, Kari, with the younger generation of employees, they're not looking at those areas of compensation because they don't see themselves staying in any one place long enough for retirement or even health insurance to ultimately be a major deciding factor. So I find myself wondering how the employer of tomorrow, meaning tomorrow, not 10 years from now, is going to think about how we repackage what we offer to speak to a younger generation that's not looking for their career job. They're mobile.
Except they are looking for health insurance.
They
When
are.
they turn 26. I can say that from experience.
And I think our pitch on benefits, has yielded some rewards when it comes to experienced employees thinking about making a move either from other local government work or from the private sector to us. I think Julia makes a very good point that it may or may not currently be in order to sort of the younger generation, but the health insurance piece is significant, and we have some options that are good.
And then just the retirement piece, and I understand, I remember when I was 25, got retirement
Right.
a long way up.
Right.
But, sometimes now I think that we're gonna need to be looking at maybe a non-traditional age group, and it does not take that long to get invested in the New Hampshire retirement system. And pointing out that even, 10 years in the system to supplement Social Security. If somebody is trying to gauge, do I want to spend the last 10 years of my career in private or, I mean, it just really
Yep.
seems that it's important.
And we do see that
Right,
age
and
group
when
coming.
it's easy to look at the, it's online, and figure out, what additional is that going to be? And I mean, just to help people think through, what is the present day value of that? You know, if they're trying to decide, yeah, do I want to do private, do I want to do municipal? It really is an advantage that I don't think it's been really touted. And certainly if somebody is younger, even if they're going to move, if they think, yeah, I'm going to stay here in New Hampshire. Well, it is portable. So I just wanted, and the finance committee has just been, you know, very interested in making sure that, yeah, that the total compensation picture is looked at and maybe do some, you know, additional education. The last question that I had, and I have a feeling that it may be in the unallocated costs, but the 6.92% maximum increase in healthcare, what is the dollar amount of that increase? I didn't, is that considered the section 125?
Right.
That's for our health insurance. I can get you that actual.
Yeah, it would just be, you know, great for us to understand, you know, of the total amount that budget is going up, what is the potential that's really, you know, based on.
It is sorry to interrupt, it is in the.
Okay, and is that the section 125 benefits?
Yes.
Okay, so that's actually, well, it says that it's going up by 5%.
Yeah, that's when you factor in our actual census. It's not necessarily a straight 6.9%, Kari, but that's all broken out on the end.
We're expecting that the health expenses would be an additional 8,000 to the budget, which is not,
This is for 8.
well, it said.
What are you talking, what page are you on?
69 to 1777. Is that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like that could be a big number, but it sounds like it's like $2,000.
Are you, well, which
What page
number,
are-
what
what
page
page
are you
are you
on?
She's down to 79. Yeah.
Okay,
79
yeah.
of the unallocated costs.
Right, okay.
And then there's where it's expenditures, the left-hand column, the first employee benefit, section 125.
Right.
And I guess that is, you know, healthcare.
Right.
And then it's considered the fiscal year 22 budget, the fiscal 23 budget, the difference is about 8,000. So 6.92 kind of sounds like a big number, although it's not that much greater than current inflation. But 8,000, okay.
We, and that's because we do a pretty detailed census
Right,
of our employees.
turnover,
Right,
and so on.
right.
So it would be a bit higher.
Right. We don't just inflate it by 6.9%. Betsy started this tradition. Tina's carrying it on, working with department heads to go employee by employee and be very specific about the actual cost of the health insurance package they've selected and what the impact of the guaranteed maximum rate increase will be. Yep.
Kari, I don't know if you're aware, but just as part of the education program for employees, they get every year a total comp summary of all their benefits, which many companies do not do, but that helps them understand and also go home and talk to whoever that where they are and why it's probably a pretty good deal. So just be aware of that.
It's just that they may not realize the retirement piece that would come after they retire and how that can supplement Social Security. So if they're at home, think about, what are we gonna do when we retire? Knowing that you have that piece, you may make the jobs here or in any municipality. But I appreciate what you're saying, Bill, that just understanding that people see what a family plan costs these days. They may not, if they haven't been on the market themselves, understand that can be a $25,000
A year expense.
Yeah, and yeah.
And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, Dave and Dee finished and circulated the total compensation statements to each of our employees, so we each get a copy. Sorry.
David, thank you very much.
Yes, I think I've been discussed.
With gratitude. With gratitude.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
You did such a good job, Dave. We're postponing planning and zoning till the end of the meeting. And we're doing social services tomorrow night.
Okay, so we're gonna move that to tomorrow night.
That's tomorrow night.
Okay,
And now we can do administrative
Administrative
services.
services, yes.
Dana, come on up. No. We know this is not your first rodeo by a long shot, but it's your first rodeo here.
Thanks, Dave.
Right. So yes, this budget, I won't say has been challenging. The challenging part of it was thinking that I could use the software to do the budget. And so I attempted to do the budget using the software and then realized that all of the spreadsheets linked to everything else. So I've pretty much been on this budget about 3 times now. So, not that I can answer every question. But
She knows where the bodies are buried.
I know it was there, yes. So my biggest challenge is, having just hit my 6-month mark in this position, is learning the way that Hanover does business. And it's a bad way of doing business. It's just different from what I've encountered before. Part of it is, kind of puts me to the next question as moving forward. So with learning everything that I have over the last 6 months, I am working at reorganizing my departments. So I kind of oversee the associate assistant town clerk and tax collector, and the accounts payable, payroll, things like that. Very different, and everyone, when I first came on, thought that I was the town clerk. So it's been very difficult to, segregate, because a lot of the duties that the town clerk did, that Betsy did in this combined position, still kind of fall under me. So that's part of the reorganization, kind of put a little buffer in the budget to allow me to look at what all of my employees do and look at what their capabilities are. So, make sure that I'm utilizing them to the best that I can. Looking at my, position of Pat, who, I look at as my right hand, putting her more right hand, because I've learned that when doing the budget, I was the one doing the budget. I mean, all the department heads, but when it came to all the pieces coming to me, it was me putting everything together, which, didn't help last week when I got the stomach bug and had to work through the budget, luckily from home. Accomplishments over the last 6 months, because I've been here a year, just learning the ropes. I have wonderful staff, and they have, without them, I would not, I probably wouldn't be here. It's just a lot of, when you step into somebody who was in the job for 20 years, it's, they have their way of doing things, and then trying to decipher the way that they did things has taken some time, but not planning on going anywhere. And I'm looking forward to reorganizing it, and next year when it comes to budget, I will have a better feel for the town, all the departments, and I look forward to it.
Yeah. It's like you made it.
I made it. So if you look
Well
at,
done.
thank you. So if you look at my budget, really didn't go up very much. It's minimal. And that basically is, like I said, I did put a buffer in there for the reorganization. And so if you have any questions on that one, then we can go into that. If you want.
I think it's important to point out that the challenge that Tina has uniquely is that when Betsy did this function, she wasn't always the town clerk. So we had an elected town clerk, and then a living local town clerk who, Sally, who moved into the community. And then Betsy became our town clerk, could run for town clerk because she's a Hanover resident in New Hampshire. And this has got to be one of the most frustrating aspects of this oh so often frustrating state is cities can appoint their own city clerks, and they don't have to live in the city for whom they work, but towns must elect a resident town clerk. And you think finding police officers is a difficult position to fill. Why would anybody in their right mind today want to run for the position of town clerk, given the fracas that has erupted over the whole elections process? So you'll note that we don't even have a deputy town clerk who works for us full time. Roberta Hitchcock is our newly appointed deputy town clerk. We have an associate and an assistant town clerk because those job titles don't require that those individuals be Hanover residents. Absurd, especially in today's world where what communities really need to be able to do is recruit qualified individuals. And I'm looking at Mary because she knows this oh so well. You need to be able to recruit qualified individuals who actually do this as a profession. But to find somebody that lives in Hanover that wants to do this or has training in this role as a profession, not easy. So instead you look to find a volunteer to run as town clerk, who is your town clerk in elected name, and then backstop that person with folks whose job titles are not town clerk or deputy town clerk, unless you're lucky enough to either find somebody who lives in Hanover, can afford to live in Hanover, or the town buys a piece of property to become the home of the town clerk, because that's quite frankly what's required. So Tina, when she talks about restructuring, is talking about just that. And we're talking about propping somebody up, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but finding that right person who wants to run as town clerk come May, that is in the title, but that relies on full-time staff to do the job, because it, quite frankly, it's a full-time job, and then be willing to serve at elections and be on the front lines.
Like Charlie did.
Like Charlie did, but Charlie,
He was definitely a figurehead.
exactly. If you thrust Charlie into a dispute with the AG's office about whether Dartmouth student A or short-term resident, Hanover resident B was eligible to vote, I think Charlie would have run scared out the door. So Betsy sort of served that function and then ultimately said, I might as well just run for this job because I actually live in Hanover. But it's not easy. And unfortunately, it doesn't have to be this hard, but our funny little state makes it difficult.
One thing that I found is I was interested that there was no funding here yet or expense here yet for the Mascoma bank loan. But that doesn't hit until yet the next fiscal year. And we're going to start to see repayment of that one.
Right.
So I was off by a year in my thinking.
Which, and then it was a question, I mean, Pete Kabaki and even myself, I went back through, you know, and even when you posed the question today, I'm like, I know the answer, but I went back to
Just verify it.
Bill and Mascoma Bank and yes, and because we haven't drawn anything on the line of credit because we haven't needed to. And even if we did draw it right now, the amount of interest is gonna be nominal. So we actually don't pay a payment until December of 2023.
Got it. Okay, so we move on to unallocated.
That's page 79. 76, I'm sorry.
76.
So my department gets to handle all of the, I'm not gonna call them miscellaneous, but all of the ones that pretty much affect every employee in town. It's not specific to someone's budget. So that's when Kari had said, you know, we have all of the employee benefits, you know, short-term interest, you know, the revenues as far as the taxes, bill tax, things like that. That one which falls in here. There's not much, you know, a huge change. Like Julia said, we do go through on the benefits. I basically have each department give me a list of all of their employees. And then we go through what they have for benefits, what they're eligible for benefits. So rather than just take last year's budgeted number and increase it by the 6.9, I feel there's much better budgeting to look at actuals. And then if we have a vacant position, we just assume that person's gonna take a family plan. And, you know, we may go if they have to take a single.
But then if they take a they can't get pregnant until the next budget year. I mean,
That's right.
they have to go through HR on that, just, yeah.
It's a
Yep.
special clause. Oh, yeah, that's not legal.
That's right. That's right. So,
Am I going through this particular budget, I did not see anything that jumped out at me to even question, except for 1 million, I couldn't believe it. You know, 20 years.
Right?
yeah. But Peter, I thank you for those questions because that made me look in the files, go back and pull the 2004 agreement and read through that agreement. So then that familiarized myself with, even though it's at the tail end of the 20 years.
You're ready for the tail end.
It's exactly.
Okay.
And I can't believe we're winding down to the tail end, but we are.
Seems like yesterday we did that.
And same with the community center bond, but,
Time goes so by.
yep.
Okay, well, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Judy, would you text Rob?
Yeah, I texted him, but I'm gonna.
He's out in the, I saw him in the corner.
And just
I'm
just
sorry.
for the public, one of our struggles every other year is the retirement plan. Hey, that the state moves it up and we're required to pay for it. So this coming fiscal year that we're talking about is the off year.
Yes, thank you.
You're talking about retirement system?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would, not to be a buzzkill, but.
Oh.
Well, I'm sorry. It's gonna put more pressure on you to generate more building permit revenue for the fiscal year 23-24 year.
You have plenty of time.
And, I'm a short timer, so it doesn't matter to me, right? But I was really discouraged to see the update from the retirement system on how their investments did in 2021, not well. That always translates, guys, to where the retirement system board will this summer have an actuarial update. And that will lead them to set their rates for the July 1, 23 and July 1, 24 next cycle. I think we're going to get slammed again, based on the performance of their investments in 21. Calendar 21. Now, calendar 22 could be better, but boy, we're not off to a good start, folks, just based on today. So I just think it's one more factor the board should be aware of, the finance committee should be aware of, Tina will need to be aware of, Dave will have to be aware of. I just think it's out there as it's starting to sort of flash yellow, that's all.
Mike, could you send me that number?
Yeah.
What that they said they're.
Yeah,
total return
I'll pull from the retirement system website, the update they circulated on their investment performance last year, and it was really disappointing.
If you send that to the finance committee,
Yeah. Again, we managers see that and go, what next?
Okay.
So,
Not good news.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to, yes, I'd like to introduce our viewing public.
sorry,
to,
Rob.
Rob Hausman, who is the Director of Planning and Zoning, and he has a 6-person staff under his capable wings and is going to tell us, starting on page 68, is the narrative of his department. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. And I suspect the first thing I'd like to do is touch on the 3 questions.
Yeah.
And I suspect because COVID is the biggest challenge for the past year.
Personnel.
And personnel. So we, like all other departments that are dealing with COVID, is a whole host of areas. and department changes. We lost Michael in September. We had the opportunity to replace him with a full-time deputy building inspector, Shane Pratt, in December. Shane's coming along nicely. We stole him away from a contract inspector that was working for college. A young person who's eager to learn, has credentials, and is filling in an excellent way. And I would say very detail oriented. He has failed more inspections in the last 2 months than I think we failed in the last 2 years. So he's very detail oriented, and I'm grateful for that. We do have a vacancy that's been very difficult to fill. Just touch on it for those who may know this. Vicki retired last April. She's working for me part-time now in a retirement setting. And we have had very difficult time recruiting a senior planner. We've sent out the ad 3 times now, including a nationwide search and email to every planner in the state, public planner in the state, and we are having some difficulty recruiting. We may have turned the corner, however, in this last week, with the ability to find someone who has a skill set that we're looking for and is actually in the Upper Valley region already, so it makes the hire a little easier. So stay tuned. Vicki, that said, there is a reason to bring Vicki up. She is committed to stay on part-time to facilitate the completion of the master plan. She's been the lead staff person on that since we launched the project, and she will stay on through January of next year, this time next year, to complete the project. So you'll see in my budget an uptick in the salary line item, and that's because we're carrying that Vicki position in a part-time basis for a period of 7 months. What am I looking forward to? The completion of the master plan and its implementation strategies. We're excited. These are challenging times to do anything with public participation. But our consultant is building a virtual meeting room process that will allow us to, I believe, conduct our community forums in a way that's thoughtful and engaging to the broader community. And I'm really hopeful that this master plan lays out a framework for us to pursue the necessary changes to implement strategies that make Hanover sustainable across all fronts, from housing to environment to transportation, and address the daunting issues that face us and greater society. And then what am I most proud of? Like all, I'm very impressed with how flexible my colleagues in the department have been, and my board members and volunteers. You know, the ability to respond on a day-to-day basis with every new challenge, whether it's stepping up and being appointed as deputy health inspector or health inspector, dealing with the Omicron variant and the complaints that we're seeing, to really getting out in the field and doing the job we do every day and making sure we're safe and people we're interacting with are safe, doing our inspections and other things. So, you know, our department, like all, have stepped up and found a way forward, and I'm really appreciative of all the effort that's gone into moving this in a very positive way. With that, I'm happy to touch on any specific budgetary questions you may have, or I can go over it in broad general terms.
I don't have any, because I've been talking throughout the day, so.
I just want to make sure you have everything you need, because there's nothing quite like the importance of planning we've learned. And I am a huge advocate for the town to have a viable, thoughtful community plan. So
I think the budget reflects the necessary funding to accomplish that. And I think we're on target for that.
Including the extra money for the sort of last part of the consultant, the 50,000, which is in the operating budget, but could be moved to undesignated fund balance funded if the board wanted to. So that's the last piece that originally we talked about maybe doing Brissette fund for that, but I said, I think I can park this in the budget and save the Brissette fund for things that would feel more directly beneficial to our residents. Not that they wouldn't appreciate a sound master plan, but it's a little bit of a leap. And so, but
Yeah,
undesignated
I'm
fund
gonna
balance.
take umbrage with that comment, Julia. But we haven't had a plan for a long time, and there's some things that we should have had taken
Right.
care of by now.
Right,
So
right.
I think that if we can't find, I mean, it sounds like we have the money, so it's
We
not
do.
an
It's
issue.
in the budget
So,
now, in the tax rate.
Yeah.
As a target as the board set, but if you're looking for more opportunities to expend monies on other things, you could also potentially fund it with undesignated fund balance. So they're nice. They're three options, but it's in the budget now.
Commenting on the master plan and signing of it. Imagine, if you will, that we completed the master plan 3 years ago. And then COVID hit. It would be obsolete today. So in certain ways, the delay has given us the opportunity to experience COVID, understand how significant the student body impacts our downtown core, and how fragile it is, how we need to address housing and transportation on broad terms, and really try to get our hands around the critical issues that we're struggling with and haven't struggled with for years.
And Rob, we may be learning something about the nature of work.
Yes.
If indeed more Americans do work from home or change the way in which they work in groups, we will plan for a community that responds to the new nature of work.
Absolutely. The reason why I was delayed coming in was I was sharing the Advanced Transit Planning Committee, who's preparing an RFP to plan our next 5 years, come up with our next 5-year plan. One of the critical issues for us is what do we have for a crystal ball? We're flying blind with this conversation about whether the remote work model will change how we as a transit agency serve the region. Do we look at micro transit as an option? How do we build up scenarios, what if scenarios, consider, a full return to transit ridership and an increase in demand because we won't support road development? Or, and how do we, what are our issues? We're going to be doing that locally, regionally, and across all spectrums.
Right.
Well, I thank you.
You're welcome for
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your waiting around. Good night.
Do you need me for that one?
Nope. Nope. You're good.
Drive safely. I'm still up, yes. Because, may I turn to the town manager section? Town manager and select board. You'll want to turn to page 86 in your budget book.
And these two budgets are very simple and straightforward. No significant changes at all. You do reflect in these budgets the in-migration of the Brissette Fund money. So if the board, for example, wants to choose to increase that number, it will be reflected here as the inflow of revenue. And then the outflowing expenditure is reflected elsewhere in the budget. I think it's in the Parks and Rec. Where's the Brissette Fund expenditure? Tina, I'm suddenly blanking on
32.
32. Thank you, Pete, Phil.
32 to
Yep, thank you. Yeah. So this budget assumes no significant increases in expenditures for either the select board's budget or the town manager's budget. Obviously, as the board interviews new candidates for my position, these numbers perhaps would need to change. However, I will tell you that typically we have enough savings at the end of every year, particularly in salary line items across the general fund because of vacancies that occur here and there, that if the board were to negotiate a salary package that is more than my package is right now, we could accommodate it in this budget without the board needing to modify or amend any of the salary numbers in the town manager's budget, in my opinion. So just know that while I didn't plan in the town manager's budget for any significant increase in compensation for my replacement, you certainly have some flexibility in this operating budget to negotiate something that would be a different package from mine. And other than that, the only thing we're not budgeting for, small, but we're not budgeting anything for our cultural exchange programs because Shwani and Nihamatsu are essentially on hold.
Nobody's traveling.
Right.
Could we budget some money, design money for a new logo somewhere?
Is that
A new logo?
New town logo?
Yeah, I mean, you can put that on the list if you want to, Peter, or
That's for all those wishes.
for Wednesday night. So it's logo money and I have no idea, Joanna. I'm thinking 10,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a competition, it could be,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It just should be something that's out there and
Right.
how we get there, I don't know
Right.
either, but
Yeah.
it's just something I
Yeah.
think we should do.
Is this like-
Oh, it precedes me. So it's at least 25 plus years ago. And I think probably more like 30 plus years ago, Mary.
I have no idea. But that would be part of the, you know, someone's research. project.
Yeah.
This one, is this appropriate time to talk about percent?
Yes,
Where's the-
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think we need to, just for the, we're, right now, we're, I think, yeah. Last year, we started the practice of getting town approval for the full amount of the percent fund. Explaining to the town that we had certain specific things in mind, and the rest is in the event that something came up during the year. I'd like to follow that same precedent.
Okay.
And then we have, right now, we have what, 180,000 identified, 100 for to support the
Campion Arena.
fundraising,
Yep.
40,000 for the
Lights.
lights.
Right?
Which I forget.
Pine Park, I'm sorry. I'm
Lights
thinking
was
earmark.
And then
yeah.
40K in case.
It's 40,000 for some project that may come up during the
We're
year.
gonna have more than that because we allocate the full amount
Right.
to get approval to spend that amount, then we have total flexibility as we go into
Yep,
next year. in terms of
yep.
town approval.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
I just want to make sure we're in the same place.
Yep.
So in your message to us.
Yes.
We had identified a commitment to, can we talk about specifics? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
We'd identified a commitment to the renovation of the Campion Arena, the HIS effort, since they're trying to raise a large amount of money to renew a facility that has not been tended to in 30 years.
Right.
And so the idea is it's a 2-year commitment, $100,000 each year from the Brissette Fund.
Right.
That seems reasonable. I mean, I think the fact that I think we've discussed that we're very fortunate in that we've got the Hanover Improvement Society that covers much of the town's recreation, unlike other municipalities, and this feels like a wise thing for us to invest in. So
Right.
I can support that. The $40,000 for the Pine Park Trail, I think it's great that we're looking at actually providing parking and an accessible trail to get to Pine Park. I think that's, for me, that's good. That 40,000 of miscellaneous, and we talk about a pickleball court.
That's one option. Mhm.
I want to plan for our recreation. You know, it's one thing, Pine Park has done trail planning and trail design and really thought about how that 100 acres should be used. Trescott has done the same in terms of that beautiful piece of property. Hanover Improvement Society's, doing their capital planning. We have a recreation and parks department in the town of Hanover. And I've yet to see a plan for what our recreation should be, what we should be doing for recreation in this town. And I think pickleball is great. I think tennis is great. I think there's a lot of sports that are great, but before we spend any kind of money on a facility, another facility that we have to take care of, I want to make sure that we're taking care of what we have. And this is something that everyone in the town thinks is worthwhile. And so I think it's good that it's kind of lumped for something, but I really will not. I can't get behind pickleball until I know that that's the highest and best use of $40,000, and I'm not convinced. So
Right, and I think we here, my interpretation was we're committed to the 100 and the 40, and the rest we have at our discretion if we get approval. Julie was trying to carve out another 40,000 to get approval. I'm trying to carve out another 300,000 to get approval.
I mean, there's a ton of money here.
Yeah, there is.
And the intent wasn't to sit on the money. The intent was to
Right.
do the right thing, right?
Right. There's also a group that's looking at a seasonal skating rink with compressor option that could provide outdoor skating that's more reliable than a pond. And so I simply wanted to be sure that the town had money appropriated so that if something emerges, we can move with just a public hearing rather than having to wait to the next town meeting cycle. So it sounds like, Peter, what you're saying is you want to appropriate the full amount. That's,
485,000,
Yep.
whatever it is.
yep.
And then. tell
With
the town
100
we have a
committed.
Specific plan to spend this and this, and the rest is in reserve,
Right.
just like we did last year.
Yep.
There's no change.
Okay.
And I think we're blessed that we have this wonderful fund, and it's difficult to find good ways to spend it within the context of the intent of the fund. And that's just a
Right.
good problem to have, right? That's called an upscale problem.
Right.
Okay, so I think we've got that one.
And that's a simple in and out, so it
It's a
doesn't
simple in and
impact
out.
the tax rate, right?
So a question came up in a school budget committee meeting, and the question was, could reset funds be used for anything in conjunction with the schools? And nobody knew the answer, and
I think that would have to be an offline discussion. I think that's an offline discussion.
Oh, okay, so, I mean, but the language of the fund, does it specify if that is,
It specifies for town, I have to go back and look at it specifically, Kari, but it's clearly discretion based upon the select board
right,
intended for town.
okay. And so.
There's no mention of school in that fund.
Okay, but if somebody had an idea, they could talk to you about it, but I know that you and the trustees are the arbiters and the generators of ideas. Okay, thank you.
We have next.
So that is all that we have tonight on the budget.
I think just for the sake of introducing you to the records, there was a memo for you recently, Julia, just for the record. You offered the following budgeted items that we could consider using undesignated fund balance because they appear to be that they are one-time expenses.
Correct.
And those are the website platform at 45,000. Additional funds for the sustainability master plan at 50,000. And I'm a little confused about the third one. This is an additional 30 or?
No, this is
the 30
this
we
is
need.
the 30 we need to
It's
do
the
a
30 we
compensation.
need to do the compensation plan, and
Correct.
it's buried someplace in some budget now.
It's not buried now, Peter.
So it's not budget.
It's not budgeted. No,
That's what I didn't.
no.
So we got two that are budgeted and one that is not budgeted as additional consideration for use of undesignated fund balance.
Correct.
Okay, and then you've also given us a list of items that that are not in the budget that are coming along at us sooner than later relative to the heat pumps at HPD, the heat pumps at Department of Public Works.
Right.
And this is the same 30,000.
Yeah,
as
cross that out, because it doesn't matter whether it's on
above.
the.
So it really,
yeah.
really belongs down below because it's not budgeted.
Right, it's not budgeted, right,
So it belongs down below. So that's the same 30,000.
right,
Okay, now I get it.
right. And the other three are, we're Peter Kovacki in the CIP, which you'll be looking at tomorrow night, is setting aside money in the CIP so that at the end of 7 years for our 2 power purchase agreement funded solar arrays, we have money to buy out those arrays. Another option is that you seed the reserve with monies from undesignated fund balance. So you're ready to buy out those arrays. You've saved to buy out those arrays sooner and take some pressure off future budgets.
So for the viewing audience, we'll be getting this, I guess, tomorrow night.
Yep.
But we have a very healthy undesignated fund balance. And that was the result of frugality during this past fiscal year. And so we have some options in terms of how to use that money. And we'll be discussing those tomorrow night and probably more so even on Wednesday. This is the best way to manage that.
Right, right,
That money.
right.
But there are some additional options as to things coming down the road that we may reserve that money for, or actually put it immediately towards that purpose.
Correct. It's certainly one option you have to sort of steward those monies. There's no reason, there's nothing wrong with having it accrue an undesignated fund balance either, but you could reserve it for a special
You will not
purpose.
burn a hole in our pocket.
Right, right.
Okay. So, is the budget hearing complete for tonight? Okay, sorry, you have another? All right. So I'm gonna call the budget hearing to an end and then move on with our regular agenda. The next item of business is a recommendation to accept administrative corrections for the summer project.
And this is just as part of the reval. We discover little odds and ends, and these next two, both the administrative correction for Summer Park and the administrative correction with respect to the 79 Tunis Road property are just cleanup post reval.
Motion, sir?
Yeah, I need a motion.
I move that we accept the recommendations. May I put them together, both
Let's
the
do it.
Summer Park
Do it.
and 79 Tunis Road? These are administrative corrections.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Wait a second. Second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. I guess that you need to request it for abatement of interest charges. That was
Right.
all $34.
Right, minor. We can abate $25, but at less, but nothing above that.
And they recommend this.
They recommend.
I move that we abate the $34.63.
So second?
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Public hearing for March 21st.
This is an item, Rob has developed what's called a parklet ordinance, which essentially.
It's so fun. I just
I-
love that name.
I know. So it is part of our further formalizing the outdoor dining on our sidewalks procedure going forward, to include requiring that our parklet inhabitants make some additional improvements to the parklet. For example, building a raised platform on which the diners sit, as opposed to having them sit straight on the asphalt. And doing a bit more, something slightly more upscale than Jersey barriers, which we were criticized for as having a rather industrial appearance. So Rob put together a parklet ordinance. He's worked through this with DPW. He's also worked through this with some of the restaurant inhabitants, future inhabitants of these parklets, and everybody thinks this is nifty. And this would just be memorializing that so that it takes it, it removes it from the zoning ordinance, which we are currently not in compliance with, and places it in its own parklet ordinance.
I love that. I move that we set this public hearing for March 21st.
So, excuse me.
Okay, we look forward to that. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No worries. I'd like to add, I think we need to approve the minutes of February 7th. Not on the agenda, but
Okay,
not on any of these agendas, so we only do it tonight. Everyone had a chance, I looked at February 7th, I wasn't at the meeting, but I read the minutes.
it's on your agenda for Wednesday night.
Oh, Wednesday night?
Yeah.
All right,
I thought I'd seen it on there, so, yeah.
then let's not do that.
Yeah.
Administrative report, Julie, what have you been up to?
So I did want to know, the board to know that we, interestingly enough, relative to masking now, COVID update. As I shared with the board on Friday, I was involved in a really helpful joint conversation with the college and the school district last Thursday about their thinking relative to requiring masks indoors on the campus and in the schools, because as you would imagine, post the governor's press conference on Wednesday, where the state basically said masks aren't required indoors anymore, that caught us all by surprise. The college and the school district independently had arrived at an initial preference to shoot for somewhere around middle of March. 15th of March is the last day of exams at Dartmouth. Students depart for spring break at that point. And the school district concurred. They really wanted to have about 2 weeks post the end of the midwinter vacation when everybody traveled, as they were seeing an uptick in cases in the schools post that vacation week to settle back into a new routine. We had indicated that we wanted to wait for the CDC to opine on this, as well as consult with the school district and the college. Friday, the CDC came out with their revised recommendations, which is that indoor masking requirements would be based on a county by county status of COVID cases. Because the emphasis is on severity of illness and number of hospitalizations. Interestingly enough, as of this morning, Grafton, Sullivan, and Stratford County are still on the indoor masking recommended list that the CDC has published for the state of New Hampshire. And that has everything to do with our case counts in Hanover, Lebanon, and Claremont on our side of the state, where we still have substantial transmission. Today, we were at 126 cases. Lebanon is at 67 cases. I was expecting when I went to the CDC website, based on the news that 80% of the country would essentially no longer need to wear masks indoors, I was expecting to see that they would not recommend that any of New Hampshire need wear masks, but in fact, 3 counties in New Hampshire are still deemed masks recommended indoors. So the current feeling is to support the college and the school district in their desire to remain, to support the CDC's recommendations, which they're applying nationwide, and to continue to monitor our county status, acknowledging that in Grafton County, the 3 communities with the highest rates of COVID are Hanover, Lebanon, and Plymouth. So there are 3 communities that are dark blue on the Grafton County map, and only 3, and we are one of them. And it's because of our student population. We just have a younger population that's been that have experienced fairly high rates of COVID exposure. So that's where we are. I had a couple of emails this morning from restaurants just wanting to have a sense of things. I continue to get email communications, a handful a day, split about right down the middle. Don't give up masks. Why are we still wearing masks? And so what I'm responding to them is CDC, we're following the CDC guidelines and conferring with the college and the school district. They updated their website on Friday, Peter, in conjunction with their announcement. They are updating their website now daily as county within state conditions change. So I will be checking the CDC website every morning to see if Grafton County is still on the masking indoors recommended list. But and continuing to sort of confer with Dartmouth and the school district in terms of where they are. Obviously, the school district is facing pressure from the state and the Department of Education, given the governor's announcement last Wednesday that any schools that continue to require masks were standing in the way of a student's right to equitable right access to education. And what our school district has been able to say to Commissioner Edelblue when he's reached out is, well, our town still has a mask ordinance. And the governor made the decision that he didn't want a statewide mandate. He wanted communities to make their own decisions. So we're abiding by our community's decision. And we're also abiding by the recommendations from the CDC, which still has Grafton County as indoor masks recommended. The Lebanon City Council will be taking up this issue, I believe, on the 14th of March in a public hearing to determine if they want to continue with their mask mandate. And both the Mascoma School District and the Lebanon School District indicated on Friday that they intended to keep their mask requirements in place until about the same time that the Hanover Dresden School District is looking at, which is mid-March. So I think we're.
Is the college, is the college ending theirs on March?
That was the current discussion going on at the college, Peter, but I'm sure this will change. This is subject to change.
That's the current thinking.
Correct. Yeah. So I just wanted you all to know and the community to know we're not being arbitrary here. This is based on very thoughtful conversation that's going on within the community. Other than that, I have to tell you, we're all monitoring the Ukraine situation very carefully. I certainly didn't expect to come into the office this morning, having to have a conversation with my emergency management director about should we be planning for a nuclear attack. But I think we as community officials need to be taking this very seriously. I don't think we're dealing with a rational actor who has access to the nuclear codes in Russia. So we're having a planning meeting tomorrow to talk about this. You know, that we would be having a conversation like this is flabbergasting to me, but given what we've been through over the last 2 years. So plague of locusts next, I don't know. Yeah, so I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but as your manager, I feel like we need to be talking about this at the state level. So far, when we conferred with the state this afternoon, they're like, no, we're not thinking about this. So I am. And that's it for administrative reports.
Select board reports.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report.
Request for a non-public session to discuss items pursuant to RSA 91A3, 2A, C, and E.
Bill Garrity, yes.
Peter Christie, yes.
Nancy Carter, yes.
Joanna Whitcomb, yes.
We are in non-public session. Thank you. See you tomorrow night.
No.
We're done.
Good night.